applies to my life. I am here by divine appointment. My life's purpose is already within me, and I am committed to its unfoldment. As I hear truth today, I am set free. Let's grow together. God is good all the time.
All right. Now, I didn't find that I was speaking today, so I know the small crowd is not going to but I'm definitely not Gina, as you can tell. Gina's taking a break, and it's okay. But today's a pretty special day. So once a year we get a chance to honor our moms. We honor them all the time, but once a year it's official. We get a chance to honor our mothers. And so I'm really happy that I could be here today and speak with you about it, to honor our mothers and our grandmothers and the other strong female figure that was in our lives. I had several. I was raised in the country. My mother worked, and I had at least 3 other mothers in the neighborhood that straightened me out when I needed to be. And today, the suggested topic is about nurturing and setting boundaries to improve our lives and hopefully improve the lives of everyone around us and the people that we know and love, and even those that we've just met recently. And if I'm speaking too loud, it can be turned down, I promise you. I can't be in 2 places at one time. Sorry. So a quote from Ernest Holmes says, "In the Science of Mind textbook, Dr. Holmes talked about the feminine principles. He described it as the universal soul in man and subjective or subconscious intelligence. And the universal medium or soul has been called the womb of nature and also the Holy Mother, because it is receptive to the spirit and is impregnated with divine ideas. It gives birth to the ideas of spirit and is therefore the feminine principle of nature." And now that was a pretty beautiful but complicated way of saying, behind every person in life is the feminine energy pushing ever so gently everything into existence. The energy is there, but without a medium willing to receive the energy, nothing comes into fruition. So today we honor all of you and say thank you, Holy Mother Spirit. Without it, none of us would be here today. And before I dive into the meat of the subject, I want to tell you a little bit, probably more than you need to know, about my mother, who was special to me and to 5 other kids, by the way. I think all of us are within 10 years of each other here, probably, so you can all kind of relate to some of this anyway. And I sang a little song for Alita the other day, yesterday, and she said, "Did you really like your mother?" I said, yeah, I love your mother. Would y'all like to hear another version of Mother? I'll be happy to do that. Okay. It's wonderful. That M is for the many times she whipped me. O is for the times I hollered out. T is for the tears I shed to save me. H is for our old rundown house. E was where I with meanness in them. And R stands for rough, and rough shall always be. Put them all together, they spell mother. The word that ended up whipping to me. Sorry. and she was the quartarian at the house. I have to say that, but she really was a good person.
Yes.
She was, I promise you. But I learned that years ago, so I thought, why not? You know. So anyway, I'll give you some information about my mom. So probably more than you want to hear, but that's okay too. Mom was born in 1920, which was slightly before the Depression started by 9 years, but the Depression went on to like 1941. So she was born in 1920, July 20th, and was the youngest of 6 kids. And she was a German stock with a little Irish and English thrown in. Okay, so and she went through as far as the 8th grade, which a lot of women back in those days said because they didn't need a high school education or college or whatever. You know? And so one day she was in the yard, my dad was passing by, And she was almost 16, and my father had just turned 25. And they started talking. Now, I'll bring pictures of my father for Father's Day, maybe, and he had movie star looks, okay? Dark wavy hair, blue eyes, nice copper. I look nothing like my father. But anyway, so they started talking, and Dad asked her to go to the movies, and she agreed. And her dad was a real authoritarian, and I even mean in some respect to the kids. And I think she probably snuck out to go to the movies. And then she went later than she expected, so she was afraid to go home. And so after a so-called whirlwind relationship, they decided to get married. And I don't think that Dad or my grandfather met each other, even I know they at that point for quite a while. So anyway, Mom knew nothing about metaphysics. That stuff wasn't discussed when I was a kid, you know. If you were talking religion, it was traditional religion for sure. And but she knew it wasn't good to lie. And so, being smart, whenever they decided to get married, they went from Ohio. So they went across the river into Kentucky, and she put the number 18 in her shoe. So when the justice of the peace asked her, how old are you? She said, I'm over 18. That way she didn't have to lie. Pretty smart. Pretty smart. And so anyway, you got to think about that for a minute. Anyway, so they got married, and they got married in May of 1936. In March of 1937, the worst flood in Ohio River history came through, and Dad had to carry her out of the water to safety because she was pregnant at the time. After that, when my oldest sister was born, 14 months after they got married, 12 months later, my other sister was born. 14 months later, my other sister was born. So she was 19 years old. She got 3 kids already. Not more than a kid herself, you know, like a lot of the folks back in those days. And then she said she figured out what caused them, and they spaced them out every 3 years, you know, after that. So that was, you know, smart. But when the little ones, the older ones were little, you know, it's a poor area, you know, I'm sorry to say. But where they were living was there was holes in the wall. And she said when the babies would wet their diaper, it'd actually freeze right on because of holes in the wall. Well, that's pretty tough. But luckily, when I came along, it wasn't quite that bad. Pretty close. So anyway, so tough times make tough people. And my mother was tough. I have to give her credit for that. My father quit work in 1952 at age 41. He got tired of working for somebody else, so he started raising animals, small animals. And he raised small animals and at a large scale. And we had 500 rabbits, we had 1,500 guinea pigs, we had chickens, you name it, we raised it one time or another. And so that's how we made a living for a while. That was in 1952. And my mother, because money was tight, went to work in 1953. The problem is we didn't have a car. My house was 10 miles to town, so she would hitchhike. Start hitchhiking to work. But luckily, it was in the country; everybody knew everybody, and so we'd pick her up and take her, and that was good. I don't know how far she had to walk in the beginning, but anyway, she did. And then the next year, we actually bought a 1949 Chevy from a friend of Dad's, that was a mailman, a country mailman. So the driver's side door was wired shut. And Lord knows how many miles was on it. I don't have any idea how many miles, but a lot. He was a mailman. So anyway, so Mom learned to drive. Very scary. She only took out a few fence posts prior. So that happened. So she was driving. She would drive the end of our road 3 miles, walk a half a mile to the bus stop, catch a bus to go to town. She didn't trust herself driving in town at that point in time. So I don't know if any of you had moms like that, but mine was pretty much a hard head. But we loved her anyway. You know, she was, like I said, she was German, good German style. And the one thing we did, we never was on welfare. They had it back then. And we was never on welfare, never missed a meal. We had to raise a large garden. The state did come one time and threatened to take the kids. And Dad said, well, you better bring your gun next time because I have mine and you're not taking my kids. And they never come back. I don't understand, but they never came back. So anyway, so my mother eventually started driving all the way to town. Drove into town. She was 10 miles, and she went to work for $1 an hour. That was the minimum wage back then. She worked for 39 years as a press room and dry cleaners. And 11 of those years, she worked in the evenings at another dry cleaners to make ends meet. Luckily we had a garden and raised animals, so if we wanted a chicken or a rabbit had to eat or something like that, that'd be great too. We did. So anyway, in 1956, March of 56, us kids were out in the yard playing. There was 3 or 4 of us still at home, and realized that our house was on fire. And so our house burned. And needless to say, they never lost the foundation. Our house burned, and Dad was at the neighbors. I was 7 at the time. So me and my other sister next to me ran to the neighbors, it was about a block away, and let Dad know. And then we went to the next neighbors, another little ways away, and had them call the fire department. And had them call Mom at work. And so they did. And the boss came to my mother and said, told her what was going on, said, your house is on fire, house burned. She said, is anybody hurt? He said, no. She said, okay, because he said, you'll be driving home. She said, no, I'm okay. Good German, good sturdy Englishman and German. Said, I'm good, no problem, I'll drive myself. And she did. So we kind of split up. I know it's a long story, but I promise I'll get around to it. We kind of split up between, I was at one family's house, neighbor, another neighbor, my sisters had another neighbor. And for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then a lady that had an empty house within walking distance let us live at that house rent-free until December, where Dad could build another house. This time we built a cement block house, a 3-bedroom cement block house. Because he didn't want it to burn so quick. The last one was like a tar paper shack, so to speak. So he wanted to burn that quick. So we ended up with a 3-bedroom cement, which the house is still there, by the way. We moved in Christmas Eve of 1936. So that was good. And we lived there until my dad passed, Mom eventually passed, of course. And my sister lived there for longer after that. So my mother didn't know anything about metaphysics, like I said, but she worked hard, and she knew if she worked hard and did the right things, that good things would happen. And so Mom borrowed $3,600 from the bank, and that's how Dad built. She drew up the plans, and that's how Dad built the new house. She drew the plan. Her dad had been a carpenter. She drew up the plans for the house, and Dad built it. And so it was nice. We were very happy to be there, believe me. Now, my mother was not much on hugs. You think of nursery, you think, hugging and telling you love them and stuff like that. And that wasn't my mother. It's a good German. That was not my mother. And that was okay, Dad was there more most of the time because he wasn't working, he was raising animals. So he was there because he loved to raise gardens and animals and kids and you name it, But Mom wasn't there then, until the evening. But she was never one because she was not trained or did not have that attention, I guess, by her family to be able to hug and say, I love you. And there is something to that. I mean, most people, when I told that to believe it, she couldn't believe it, that wasn't the case. Never? I said, no, I don't remember any time where I heard that, But we knew that they did because she started with what she did and she worked hard to make sure we had a roof over our head and plenty of food and all that good stuff. But she also gave us a character building to show us that if we did something wrong, that we could correct it. There was nothing about that. She raised us to be very independent kids and resourceful. And she used to say, her line was that if you burn your butt, you sit on the blister. Don't come to me crying that you need this or that. I'm not helping when I can, but if you do something wrong, that's your problem. You straighten it out. So My parents were married for 36 years before my dad passed. And my dad died of emphysema when he was 61. And so my mother, and this is just some character building from my mom. So my mother gets off work, she goes to the hospital, and surprised to find one of Dad's old girlfriends that he knew before they got married was there in the room visiting him. And they got to talking, but she was kind of surprised, I think a little hurt, maybe a little angry too, probably at the time. But the lady she lived at someplace in the city north of us, and they would come visit once in a while, and they would talk on the phone and stuff. And so Mom was thrilled about it, but she figured he was so ill the last year that, not much going on anyway, so she wasn't worried about it. So what do they teach us? They teach us forgiveness, right? How to forgive. And so whenever Dad passed, a week or so later, she made sure she called the lady and let her know that he had passed. That was what she figured. And, just be forgiven. Don't be angry because, something else happened. Just do that and go ahead and get out of the way, So, Dad didn't have as good a boundaries probably as my mother did, as you can probably tell. Don't want to say. But Mom did have her boundaries, and she knew her limits, and she wasn't going to cross over her boundaries, which is what we're talking about. Didn't cross over her boundaries, and she didn't want you crossing her boundaries. That's just the way it was, Not mean, not harsh. It's that she knew her limits, and she wanted you to know yours. And one thing she never did, because of how bad her dad was, she would never, ever interfere with who we wanted to marry or who we were seeing, who we fell in love with, or whatever. That was our business, not hers. And she wasn't going to interfere with it because it was how her dad was whenever she was growing up. And so that was a good thing. But she taught us how to have boundaries, and how to hopefully live within those boundaries, and we all try to do that, and to learn how to nurture. Now, excuse me, the theme for this, what they give us to talk about today, was about nurturing and of course honoring the feminine side and I don't know what I'm looking for. Anyway, most of it was honoring the boundaries, and so we try to do that in the nurture. And I looked it up in the dictionary to see what the word nurture means, and just for grins, I guess. And if I can find it here, I will give you the definition. The definition, according to the dictionary, nurturing means the act of providing food, protection, support, encouragement, or the act of educating or training. Now, Mom wasn't the nurturer kind that you would think of to give you a big hug and tell you that, and tell you that she loved you, but she was top of the scales on all the other stuff. The stuff that she knew she could do. She could train you, and she could give you encouragement. And, she could make sure the food was on the table and a roof over your head. And so that's all part of the nurturing field for the feminine. Stuff that we sometimes forget is important, but all that stuff is needed. And even for us, if someone did a good job, they say, hey, you did a really great job, don't act stupid and go, whatever. Say thank you. If they did a good job, say thank you and go on. Don't make them feel bad for telling you something and you just kind of blew it off, whatever. We all need to be a little bit respectful, I guess, of other people's thoughts. And that's what at least that's my interpretation. So I know you know more about my family today than you need to know, but I hope it was interesting, because I really did have a pretty interesting life growing up. We were raised in the country. We had everything we needed. I hated working in the garden. I was still there doing it, and once in a while I'd get sunburned like there was no tomorrow. I'd usually try to slip away to the neighbors and Dad wouldn't come after me, which is good. I didn't like the sun. As you can see, I'm so fair complected, I burned about 10 minutes. And so I didn't like being in the garden. I would, we'd have to do, all of us had to work and be in the garden to do that. But nurturing, if you think about it, and I don't know how your families are, some of your families may be a lot better at it than mine. But my mother did a great job, really. She raised 6 of us. 4 of us was the last 4. 2 of them had already got married, but 4 of us was there still when she went to work. And it was been nice if she was able to be there, to be with us, but Dad was there. At least there was somebody, a parent there. And like I said, I had neighbors that actually nurtured me probably as much as my mother did, and probably taught me in a lot of ways on how to behave. And my mother, the only thing her main concern was that I know right from wrong, and she figured that by the time I was 12, if I didn't know right from wrong, I'd probably never learn it. And so she made sure that I knew right from wrong. And if she was gonna whip us, the kids, sometimes you had to go get your own stick. And you didn't bring back a little one. It works. She would tell you, I'm not spanking you because I'm mad. I'm spanking you because you made a mistake. And so she would correct that mistake, and you didn't try to do that again. And I have to admit, by the time I was probably 10, I realized that if I caught Mom before anybody else could tell her what I did, and be honest with her and tell her what I did at that time, I didn't get a whipping. But if somebody else caught her before I did, I could be in trouble. But that's the way life goes. Okay. So I know it's been a little boring, but no, not been boring. Okay, good. But nurture is important. Nurturing others, nurturing yourself is important. Well, I think one of the reasons why Gina's not here today, she's going to take a little downtime to nurture herself. And so I got elected to do this. And I debated how I was going to do it, but it's Mother's Day. So I wanted to give you an insight of my mother. And she really was an excellent person, I promise you. She was not mean, even though it sounded like it. She really was a good individual. Okay? So I think I'm done. I know where Belita is. I think she's cooking some stuff back there.
Special music or song?
We do, except she's in the kitchen. Okay. I don't think I would have traded. I know I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have traded how I was raised with anybody. I really wouldn't have. I mean, it'd been nice having a little more money on hand on occasion, because you can't live on minimum wage. But yes, sir.
So you said they called the fire department. Was that 911 back then?
No, no, I don't think it was. Although they did have 911 problems. I don't know, because I didn't have a phone, and it's a country fire department volunteer. They never lost a foundation. So you can always have a foundation for sure about the house. But when Dad built a new one, he built it across the driveway at another location. He wasn't going to build it there again. But it was in the country. We had, we actually most of the time lived on about 2.5 acres. He really had 5 acres originally. He sold part of it to a church and 2 other families, and we had the other 2.5 acres that we lived on. And it would grow anything you want to. Anything you want to raise, it would grow. It definitely would grow. We had the best garden, because we had hills. It's in the foothills, and all the nutrients would wash off the hillside in the spring in the rain, and then it would go across our garden. So you could raise anything you wanted to